Our next guest is a regular here on the show. Please welcome Michael Melnick.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You know, I spend a lot of time teaching people how to take care of their backs, and one of the biggest things I focus on is how people stand. And they're not quite sure why I do that. I mean, how many of you here woke up this morning thinking you have a serious standing problem? Probably not too many of you. But have you ever stood long enough to get a backache? Yeah, probably so. Well, guess what? That's a standing problem. The issue is that people don't realize that the way in which they're doing it is very demanding. And that's what we try to help people out with, to help them take care of their back. Now, this is what I want you to understand. We tend to perceive standing to be a lot of work. When I'm doing classes for employees, I will ask my class periodically during my session to stand up. And you know what the noise is that they make when I have them stand? They'll be getting up and I hear this. And what I tell them is, do you realize that the noise that you just made standing up is exactly the same noise that a little kid makes when you make a little kid sit down? When you allow an adult to sit back down, what's the noise they make? Do you know that's exactly the same noise that a little kid makes when you finally let a little kid stand back up? And how did that happen? Because when we send a little kid to school, what do we teach them? First grade, sit still. Second grade, sit still. Third grade, sit still. Finally, they become adults, and they're sitting there going, oh, okay, I get it. And we lose that desire to move. That's what our body wants to do. Our brains kind of lost some touch with that. So, here's the issue. If I was going to ask you to stand, all of you, if I was going to have you stand and I said, for the next 15 minutes, I'm not going to let you move at all. Stay perfectly still. Is it possible within 15 minutes you're going to get a little bit stiff, a little bit sore and uncomfortable? Yeah, probably so. So if I said to you, I'm not going to let you sit back down, but now do whatever you need to do to get comfortable while you're standing, what would most of you do? Yeah, you'd move, you'd stretch, you'd do some things. And then I look at people and say, well, then why don't you just move and change positions while you're standing before you have a problem? And people look at me and go, that's okay, I'll just wait till it hurts. Wait a second. How many of you out there wait until your eyes start to burn and then blink? Right? I mean, hate to waste one during the day, huh? Ow, okay, that's better. How many of you wait till you're about ready to pass out and then breathe? Doesn't make sense, does it? How many of you wait till you're stiff, tired, fatigued, and uncomfortable and then stretch and change positions? All of us. And a cat would lay there looking at you going, what is it with these humans? I think they must be on a quest for discomfort. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Last time you were here, you talked about sitting.
Right.
And today you're going to talk about standing.
That is correct.
I actually have a standing story. A couple weeks ago I went to an amusement park. And as you know, the lines get very long. And after standing in line for 45 minutes, my back was killing me. What's going on there?
Very, very common story. The average person doesn't realize how demanding standing can be, particularly if you do it in ways that are harder on the body. There are some principles that differentiate between demanding standing and less demanding.
Yeah, well, how would I stand less demanding?
Can I stand? Is
Sure,
that okay?
absolutely.
Everybody? Okay, great.
There's a few basic principles that you need to understand about ways to minimize the demands of standing. And the first thing to know is that it has to do with lifting, believe it or not. Most people don't think of it that way. But your upper body, my upper body, is a load. It has weight associated with it. And you'll see when people stand, they'll tend to do one of two things. They'll either tend to slump forward when they're standing as they fatigue, or you'll tend to see this posture where they kind of just slump backwards like this. Either way, my upper body is outside of my center of gravity, and so it's being lifted. And that's the thing that I want to eliminate. So, if a person's standing and they have their legs in line with each other, which is the way most people tend to stand, I have no support in front of me and I have no support behind me, which means it's going to be a lift either way I go. As soon as I stagger my stance, what you'll see happening is that if I lean my upper body forward or I lean my upper body backward, my legs come with me and stay under me, and the lift is basically gone. So the first thing we tell people is when you're standing for prolonged periods, make sure that you just stagger the stance a bit. That's going to let the legs help you out. Second thing, When people are standing on hard surfaces for an extended period of time, the feet get tired, the knees get tired, the legs get tired, and that means the back's going to have to take it. Well, as the legs get tired, our brain doesn't want us to fatigue. So what our brain does is try to relax our legs. And to do that, what a lot of people will do is they'll take their knees and they'll lock their knees backwards. And as soon as I do that, the muscles in my legs start to relax. Well, the brain loves that because now I'm just resting on my bones. Right? I mean, how long does it take bones to get tired?
A long time.
A long time. Here's the problem, though. When I lock my legs out, I now have no shock absorption in my legs, which means the best shock absorber is now my back, and it's going to take most of it. So, if I said to you, Jay, climb up on your desk, jump off, land with your legs completely straight, right? Your teeth are going to explode.
Absolutely.
You got no shock absorption. What would you do just before you hit the ground?
I'd bend my knees.
You'd bend your knees. Everybody would bend your knees. Because as soon as you bend your knees, what you would feel is you'd feel the shock absorbers in your legs getting turned back on. Yeah. That's going to absorb it and take the pressure off of your back. Now, this is where people get a little bit nervous about this whole standing thing because they're saying, all right, Michael, you're saying that a staggered stance and a bend in the knees, this is the new appropriate standing position. Right? You going to do this?
I will not do that.
You probably will not do that. Nobody's probably going to do that. But if I came to your show and said, I'm here today to talk about football, does this look normal?
It does.
It does. I'm here today to talk about wrestling. Does this look normal? Yeah. It's totally normal. I'm here today to just talk about, standing in line in an amusement park.
Yeah, that looks normal too.
This looks normal too. And it's demanding. Why? Because from this position, the only thing I can do well is bob and weave, and it's a lift. So we've got staggered stance. We've got a little bit of a bend in the knees. The third thing is when you can, get a foot up. There's a good place to get a foot up.
Oh, I was wondering what this was.
Look at that. Perfect. Thank you. Getting a foot up. Where do you see this principle applied out in the community? Right, at a bar. You see this at a bar. People know this. They put a rail in a bar because they want people to be able to stand comfortably for as long as they can stand.
Right, yeah.
And what happens is when you put a foot up, it rolls the hips back a little bit, puts my back in a little bit of a more natural alignment, gets the legs a little bit more underneath me, and it makes it a much more comfortable way to stand. You'll see people when they're standing in line for a long period of time, they'll stand on their own foot, or they'll do that stork stance thing. What are they trying to do? They're trying to get that leg back underneath them. They're trying to get the back into more of its natural alignment. So we've got a staggered stance, we've got a slight bend in the knees, we've got a foot up when you can, and then the last thing is just don't stand completely still. I mean, if I really want to get my back tired, if I want to get my knees tired, my hips tired, the only thing I have to do is stand still. Because as soon as I stand still, guess what? The ankles, the knees, the hips, the back, all just have one job description, and it's not changing. And the one thing our body doesn't like is doing the same thing over and over.
Over and over again.
As soon as I start shifting my weight, and it's much easier to do when you're in a staggered stance with a slight bend in your knees. As soon as I'm just kind of moving around a little bit, guess what? My job description is constantly changing. And as a result, my body doesn't get nearly as tired, and my back doesn't get as tired. So when a person is standing, I just encourage them to do a bit of a staggered stance, a slight bend in the knees, get a foot up when they can, and move.
Move around.
And move. That's it.
But that's a lot to think about, isn't it?
It is a lot to think about.
Do you stand in line thinking about all of those concepts?
Absolutely not. And I don't expect anybody out here to do that either. But watch a person who's been standing for a long time and their back gets tired, and you will see them, without thinking about it, begin to apply all those principles. So, but at that point, it's an apology. It's not prevention. And that's what we're really talking about here. So what I try to get people to do is, if there's anything that I said in this whole segment that makes sense to them, if it's a bend in the knees and they typically don't do that, or it's a staggered stance and they typically don't do that, pick one thing and let that be part of the focus when you're standing.
So just key in on one.
Key in on at least one, and through repetition, what you'll find is that becomes much more of the normal way you stand.
Interesting. Good stuff. Michael, you going to visit us again?
You invite me, I'll be here.
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
Thanks a lot.
My pleasure.
We'll be right back.